Hello and welcome back to the Consistory of the coelc YouTube channel. I'm your host for this video, Reverend Zabel of St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church located in Dalby, Queensland, Australia. On today's video, I want to talk about the sin of pragmatism. Now this is a video following on my video on pastoral preferentialism, where I said that you shouldn't choose a pastor based on pragmatic personal reasons. Instead, you should choose a pastor based on whether he is an orthodox teacher and whether he has orthodox practices and whether he lives a moral life. And today I'm expanding that out to just church fellowship in general, and this era of choosing church fellowship based on pragmatic or personal reasons. See, Martin Luther teaches that when we are determining church fellowship, we are to make judgments based on doctrine, not on life. We're not to choose a church just because this one seems nice or because this one is big. Those are the idols of niceness or the idols of numbers. We are not to choose a church just because it's a big church. I mean, seriously, as Lutherans, if we wanted to choose a church just because it's a big church, we should all go back to the Roman church because it's much bigger. We should choose a church based on orthodox teaching and on orthodox practices. Particularly, I wanted to quote something from the Lutheran Confessions in the Treatise on the Power and Primacy of the Pope. Here, Melanchthon is discussing how we should beware of false prophets. He then also quotes 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 14, which says, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what communion has light with darkness?" Melanchthon then goes on to say, "It is indeed difficult for us to separate from so many lands and people and teach a different doctrine. But here, God commands that everyone should take care and not consent to those who teach false doctrine or intend to uphold it by tyranny." This is what I want to talk about. There are many Lutherans out there who belong to heterodox church bodies, who know that their church bodies are heterodox. They know that their church body is teaching false doctrine and has false practices, and yet they remain for practical reasons, for pragmatic reasons, for personal reasons. I can't leave this church because where would I go? I can't leave this church because all the other alternatives are too small. I can't leave this church because I'd lose my money. I can't leave this church because I'd lose the church property. I can't leave this church because I'd lose my pension. I can't leave this church because I'd lose my friends. I can't leave this church because my family would disown me. These are all earthly reasons to remain in church fellowship. And as Melanchthon says, it is a difficult thing to break fellowship with false teachers. It is difficult, but God commands us to do so. We are told to flee false teachers. We are told to mark and avoid false teachers. We are told to break fellowship with false teachers. We are not to have anything to do with them. And yet there are so many people that remain in these big churches, knowing that they are false churches, knowing that they are teaching false doctrine, simply for pragmatic reasons. There are people who have told me, "I like the coelc, I like your teachings, I like your practices, I'd like to join you, but you're so small." Or, "There's no local congregation in my area." First of all, how do you think the coelc grows unless people join it? How do you think we get churches in your local area unless someone establishes a congregation there? Those are just excuses. And the reality is that you know you should leave this false church, but that you won't because of worldly reasons. People get angry when I tell them to leave the false church, but that's because I'm pricking their conscience. They know deep down they should be fleeing from false teachers, but because of their own worldly weakness, because of the weaknesses of their flesh, they don't have the courage and the strength to actually break fellowship and go and start a new church or go and join some smaller church. People are afraid to break fellowship with the church they belong to. And when I try to rebuke them for remaining in fellowship with false teachers, when I urge them to leave this false fellowship and to seek out fellowship with orthodox churches, they get angry with me because I am pricking their conscience. They know that what they are doing is wrong, but they don't like to admit it. This is the sin of pragmatism. choosing a church body for pragmatic reasons. Remember that Jesus taught that he did not come to bring peace, but a sword that would divide families. Standing up for the truth of God's word is something difficult. The Lutherans said that it was something difficult to break fellowship with the Roman Church. Yeah, it was difficult. They risked life and limb to break fellowship with the Catholic Church. During the era of the old Lutherans, they broke fellowship with the Union Church and they risked going to prison. In the past, people suffered a lot for the preaching of the truth, for the upholding of the truth. Churches in the past broke fellowship all the time because they knew that true doctrine was so important that they had to break fellowship, even if it meant going off and forming some small micro-synod, even if it meant being alone in the middle of nowhere. People were willing to do this because they knew that the truth of God's word was important. Today, it is so much easier to break fellowship with false teachers, and yet people are less willing to do it. We won't face persecution if we leave the Lutheran Church of Australia. We aren't going to go to jail if we leave the Lutheran Church of Australia. It is possible to start a new house church. It is possible to get in a car and drive a little bit extra distance. It is possible for a pastor to get in a plane and come and see you. You know, when the early Lutherans came to Australia, they had to establish congregations out in the middle of nowhere. And they may only see pastor once a year. If they wanted to talk to a pastor, they had to write a letter which took weeks to get to the pastor and weeks to get a reply. These days, I can shoot you a text or a message over social media, or we can do a video chat instantly. I can get on the phone and call you. You can contact me at any time. In the past, if I wanted to come and see one of these distant congregations, I would have had to get on like a horse or a train and take days to travel to see them, weeks possibly. These days I can either get in a car or a plane and be there in a matter of hours. It is now the easiest time in history to break fellowship with large churches and establish new churches, and yet people seem to be the least willing. We have become lazy and cowardice when it has come to preaching the truth of God's word. People are afraid or lazy to leave the big churches and do what is right. And so in this video, I want to urge people to not give in to the sin of pragmatism, to take courage and do what is right. As Melanchthon says, it is difficult to break fellowship with so many people and so many lands and to teach a different doctrine. But God demands that we do so. We are commanded by God to break fellowship with false teachers and to seek out fellowship with true teachers and to establish new churches that teach the truth. We should flee false churches and establish new true churches. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Goodbye and God bless.